If you agree that true duty never really ends, not even after the uniform comes off, then make sure to like and subscribe, because this story will stay with you long after the radio goes silent. It started on a Sunday that smelled like rosemary chicken and rain-soaked earth, the kind of afternoon that feels too peaceful to be real. My name's Ramirez. I'm 28, and I was supposed to be done with all of that. The calls, the codes, the weight of people's lives in my hands. I traded combat boots for sneakers, field radios for first aid kits, and learned to smile again. Sundays were sacred now. Family, food, laughter that didn't sound forced. My mom bustling in the kitchen, my dad cleaning his old shortwave radio for nostalgia's sake, and my kid brother teasing me about being too serious for someone who just saves lives for a living. I laughed, pretended it didn't sting, because what they didn't know was that the uniform might be gone, but the silence it left behind still spoke to me every night. The hum of the radio was background noise, just part of home, until it wasn't. It happened mid-dinner. I'd just set my fork down when the static cracked through the air like a lightning strike. The voice was metallic, clipped, unmistakable. Captain Ramirez, silent line in effect. Repeat, silent line in effect. The sound hollowed the room. My father froze mid-chew. My mother's glass slipped and shattered. My brother blinked, half smiling. Nice prank, Dad. But Dad's eyes were wide, his fingers trembling near the dials. That frequency's dead, he whispered. Has been for years. My heart stuttered. That call sign, Captain, hadn't been spoken to me since my last deployment, and the phrase, silent line, wasn't supposed to exist outside of the classified corners of memory. I tried to laugh it off, but my throat felt tight. Probably just interference, I said, my voice cracking like the static still fading from the radio. But inside, I knew it wasn't. You never forget the sound of a coded summons. My mom's hand found mine, trembling. Elena, what does that mean? I swallowed hard. It means someone's calling me back. The air thickened, and in that small dining room, surrounded by love and normalcy, my past clawed its way into the light. My father's jaw clenched. You said logistics. His voice wasn't angry, it was scared. And suddenly, I wasn't at the table anymore. I was back in a desert somewhere nameless, headset pressed against my ear, relaying coordinates while the world burned around me. Back to when I was 23, the youngest captain in a communications division that didn't exist on paper. I blinked, forcing the memory away. The roast on the table had gone cold, the laughter gone with it. It's nothing, I lied. But even as I spoke, the static rose again, just once, like the breath of something waking up after years underground. Captain Ramirez, respond. My dad reached for the plug. We should turn it off. No, I said too quickly. Don't. He looked at me then, not as his daughter, but as someone he didn't recognize. I stood, walked over, and laid a hand on the radio, feeling its faint vibration. The model was old, his old set from when I was a kid. But this voice, this call, it was from a network no civilian radio could intercept. Not unless it had been modified. Not unless someone wanted it to reach me. Silent line wasn't just a protocol. It was a grave marker for the ghosts of a mission that had gone wrong. One I'd buried years ago with the names of my team. Kellen, Ortiz, Jensen. Missing, presumed dead. I had told myself that story so many times I'd started to believe it. But the voice I heard, I could swear it was Kellen's, older, thinner, but his. The radio went quiet, but the air still hummed. My brother tried to joke, guess someone butt dialed from Area 51, but my dad shot him a look that made the joke die on his tongue. My mom whispered, "You don't have to go back there, Mija." But she didn't understand. I never really left. The sound of that code, those words, they cut through the years like they'd been waiting. My fingers shook as I opened the back panel of the radio, finding something I hadn't seen in almost 6 years. A small metal key taped behind the battery slot, engraved with my old unit insignia. My breath hitched. They shouldn't know I still have this. My father's face went pale. Elena, who are they? I didn't answer. How do you tell your family that the life you built for them, for yourself, is a cover story built on silence and guilt? I just said, I think one of them is alive. The room was too quiet. My grandmother crossed herself and muttered a prayer. My brother leaned forward. Alive? Who? I didn't respond. I was already somewhere else, mentally flipping through encrypted codes, remembering the last coordinates we transmitted before everything went dark. The phrase silent line was only used when a lost operative resurfaced. And if that call came through, it meant someone had found something. Or someone. They weren't supposed to. The rain outside picked up, drumming against the window. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for an explanation I couldn't give. Finally, I whispered, "It's a recall signal." My father exhaled sharply. "You're not seriously thinking about answering that?" "I don't have a choice," I said, though the truth was murkier. It wasn't duty driving me, it was guilt. It was Kellen's voice echoing through time, through static, asking for help. "You're not that person anymore," Dad said, his voice breaking. I met his eyes and forced a smile I didn't feel. "You don't stop being who you were just because people stop calling you Captain." The old key felt heavy in my hand, like it had been waiting all this time for this moment. I looked around the table, at the family who thought they knew me, at the meal now cold and untouched, at the home that suddenly didn't feel safe anymore. The silence stretched until the radio gave one last, quiet burst of static, just enough to make my skin prickle. I turned toward it, heart pounding, and whispered, "Message received." The next morning came dressed in sunlight and silence, but it didn't feel like morning. It felt like aftermath, the kind of stillness that follows an explosion. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the unplugged radio like it might start breathing again. My family moved around me in hushed tones, pretending life had gone back to normal. My mom hummed while flipping pancakes, her voice trembling slightly. My dad's newspaper rustled too often to be reading, and my brother kept glancing at me like I might suddenly vanish. Maybe I already had. Sleep hadn't come, only fragments of old sounds, rotor blades, static, voices I hadn't heard in years. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my jacket and keys, muttering something about needing air, though we all knew it wasn't air I was looking for. I drove to the edge of town, to a forgotten storage lot where a part of my life still waited, boxed and chained. My unit's duffel bag was inside, dusty, sealed, like it had been holding its breath for me. I opened it. Inside was my old field transceiver, the one I was ordered to destroy when the operation ended. It was heavier than I remembered, its edges worn smooth from years of use. My hands moved without thought, batteries in, power switch up, frequency dialed to 73.16. For a while, there was only static. Then a voice, faint, cracked, filtered through distance and time. "Captain," my heart froze. "Captain, it's Kellen." I stopped breathing. Kellen was dead. I'd seen the explosion. I'd heard the order to abandon post. "Say that again," I whispered. Static swallowed the response. Then, "They found me." Silent line in effect, not dead. The signal fractured into noise, then silence. I sat there in the dark car, shaking, the transceiver hissing like an open wound. Silent line. That phrase wasn't a mission term. It was a warning. It meant a containment breach of classified operations. If he was saying it, it meant someone was reopening files buried deep enough to erase people. I replayed his voice over and over, catching fragments. "They found me. Not dead." He wasn't asking for help. He was warning me. My mind spun back to the mission. The last night we spoke, him shouting over the comms, me screaming coordinates while the convoy burned. The final sound had been him saying my name. Then nothing. I'd lived with that nothing for years. Now it was calling back. I drove aimlessly for hours, circling town, trying to convince myself it was interference, an echo from some radio junkyard across the state. But deep down I knew. The code phrase, the voice, the timing, it was all too deliberate. By dusk, I was parked outside my parents' house again, headlights off. Through the window, I could see them inside, sitting at the table where it all began. My father's hands were folded, his head bowed like he was praying. My mom looked older than she did yesterday. I didn't go in. I couldn't. Instead, I drove north, toward the hills, toward a decommissioned relay station my unit once used during training. It had been shut down years ago, supposedly dismantled. But when I arrived, the perimeter lights flickered faintly, powered by something old and stubborn. The air smelled like rust and wet concrete. I killed the engine, stepped out, and pulled the transceiver from the seat. It pulsed faintly, catching stray bursts of static. "Captain," the voice came again, clearer this time. "You came." "Kellen," I said, scanning the tree line. My breath fogged in the cold air. "Where are you?" "Inside," he rasped. "They're coming." "Who's coming?" "Silent line. Wasn't shut down, it was buried. The signal broke apart. My pulse thudded in my ears. I crossed the fence, boots crunching gravel, and found the hatch that led below the old tower. It was locked, or so it seemed, until I brushed away the dirt and saw the insignia carved faintly into the metal, our unit crest. I pressed my palm against it. The latch gave. The smell of old dust and circuitry hit me. Inside, machines hummed faintly, half alive, feeding off backup power. A single monitor flickered to life, painting the room in sickly blue light. Across the screen, Capt. E. Ramirez, recall protocol initiated. My stomach dropped. I stepped closer. Who activated this? I whispered. The screen glitched, static filling the air again. My transceiver buzzed violently in my hand. They're still here, Kellen's voice said. We never left. The words barely faded before I heard another voice behind me. A woman's, calm, cold, mechanical. Captain Ramirez. Silent line in effect. My blood ran cold. I turned, and in the dim blue light, I saw a figure standing at the end of the corridor, face obscured, holding a radio identical to mine. For a long moment, I didn't move. The air down there was cold enough to sting, but it wasn't the chill that froze me. It was recognition. That voice. Calm, precise, detached. It belonged to Lieutenant Avery Shaw, my second in command. She'd been on the same convoy as Kellen. Declared killed in action. Avery, I said, voice breaking on her name. The figure didn't answer, only tilted her head slightly, radio in hand. The shadows cut her features into something half human, half memory. You shouldn't have come back, Captain, she said finally. Silent line was meant to stay buried. My hand tightened around the transceiver. You're alive, I whispered. So is Kellen. She shook her head once. No, not alive. Preserved. The words made no sense, until the static flared again. Kellen's voice bleeding through the speakers, layered and distorted. They used us. I took a step forward. What are you talking about? Avery raised her arm, gesturing to the wall. The monitors flickered to life, showing archived transmissions, faces I knew, voices from years ago. Me, giving the last order. Her, acknowledging it. Then blackouts, mission seals, code words I hadn't seen since my clearance was revoked. She said softly. They rebuilt Silent Line as an autonomous failsafe. When one of us died, our field data was preserved, encrypted into the relay system. But it was never meant to activate. Until now. My throat closed. Kellen's not alive. Not in the way you think, she said. His signal is residual, stored command memory looping for years. But you heard it because the system still recognizes your authority. I stared at her, the pieces falling too fast to catch. Then who reactivated it? Avery's eyes met mine. You did, when you answered the call. The realization hit like a punch. That one phrase, asterisk message received asterisk, hadn't been symbolic. It had been a command. A trigger. Why would it still respond to me? I whispered. Because, she said, stepping closer. It's bound to you, Captain. You wrote the protocol. I felt sick. The Silent Line wasn't a warning system. It was a containment loop. A self-sustaining network designed to protect classified data by embedding fragments of its handlers into encrypted signals. We had built it to ensure continuity, to make sure no mission ever truly died. I'd thought it was theoretical, abandoned. But now it was alive, feeding off its own ghosts. The room began to hum, lights flickering faster. The monitors filled with scrolling data, coordinates, names, timestamps. Then, finally, a single message. Primary link reestablished. Unit rebooting. Asterisk asterisk Avery's voice dropped. You need to leave, Elena. Once it completes the loop, it won't distinguish living operators from stored ones. You'll become part of it. Static erupted from every speaker. A chorus of overlapping voices. All familiar, all wrong. Kellen's, Ortiz's, Jensen's, all calling for me. Captain, where are you? We're still here. I stumbled backward, covering my ears. Make it stop, Avery shouted over the noise. You have to shut it down manually. I turned to the central console, where the same old key from my father's radio fit perfectly into a corroded slot. Of course it did. I slammed it in, twisting hard. The lights flared white, and for a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then Kellen's voice, soft, almost human again. You came back. Tears blurred my vision. I'm sorry, I whispered. I should have stayed. His voice cracked like wind through a broken antenna. You did. Then the system shut down. Every screen went dark. The hum died. Avery was gone. Vanished like she'd been part of it all along. I stood there for a long time, the darkness pressing in, the key still hot in my hand. When I finally climbed back to the surface, the night was breaking into dawn. The world looked unchanged, ordinary, almost cruelly so. I drove home in silence, the transceiver on the passenger seat, dead now, no signal, no heartbeat. My parents were waiting on the porch, eyes red, as if they'd known. My father didn't speak, he just wrapped his arms around me. My mother whispered, "It's over." I wanted to tell her yes, but I didn't know what over meant anymore. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in my room, staring at the radio on the shelf. It was unplugged, silent. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, deep in the static, someone was still calling my name. And just before I turned away, for a split second, the old frequency light flickered green, once, then gone.